Hello, everyone. Today we're going to be going in depth into Red Green Smoker, specifically for the OP11 meta, but I guess every single tip here will be applicable in the future, hopefully. Now, mind you, there's going to be a lot of Smoker bias in this video. I love this leader. I think it's amazing. I think it's very, very strong. However, having said that, I think non-bias, this leader is currently an incredibly good meta pick. It's definitely tier one, like on par. We're talking on par with Snakeman Luffy and Grape Luffy. Um, don't let people tell you otherwise. I personally think right now Smoker is the best deck in the metagame, and this is an honest opinion that I personally hold. This definitely has a lot to do with how Smoker interacts with most of the metagame. I don't think Smoker is the strongest leader in terms of raw power, but before we get started, the idea of the video is to not only to tell you what the deck does, because you can definitely read the cards on your own, you should come out of this video knowing how to play every single matchup, at the very least, kind of a little, and having sort of an idea of how to build your own Smoker list. Obviously, I will be sharing my personal list. I think I've cooked something very nice to share with you. Now, before we move on to what the deck essentially how to build a deck, we need to understand what Smoker does as a leader. Now, Smoker, the leader effect, allows you to restand to dawn. That's mostly what the leader ability is. It also allows your Smoker to defend 8, which is pretty relevant, but essentially you're playing with 2 extra dawn every single turn since you play your 5-drop. The way you guarantee that is by playing 5-cost Smoker. 5-cost Smoker is I would say the only like mid-range card in this game, which is a weird thing to say, but mostly most decks sort of like play this tempo game. They have like the big minions, but for the most part, you have like control decks and aggro decks. However, I think this card facilitates you playing in a very particular style of gameplay that I personally really enjoy, which is playing mid-range. Now, why did I say that this card is like the true mid-range card? It's because it pretty much this Smoker is essentially immune to battle because he defends 8. So when they swing into your Smoker for combat, they're essentially swinging into like useless Captain Kid. So they they are pretty much never going to swing into the Smoker unless they're swinging for like 20 or something deep into the late game. So this card is immune to combat for the first few turns. And then, of course, in this deck specifically, you can play your Smoker together with your Tashigi, and then your Smoker is suddenly immune to dying by effect, which is obviously insane because every single turn, your Smoker lives. Your opponent is essentially losing 2 cards. Why? Because you either swing 7 with Banish and they have to combo out of the attack, or they let the life go through. And I would say a life depends on the leader, depends on the matchup, but for the most part, it's worth at least 2 cards. Now, these 2 cards are obviously complemented by a lot of things in this deck, but more specifically by Gum Gum Mulligan, which is probably the 3rd best card in this deck. Now, Mulligan, sort of like an inoffensive card when you look at it for the first time, but when you really think about it, this card pretty much has everything. If your opponent has a character turned sideways and you Mulligan the character, your Smoker can run through your opponent's Katakuri or like Big Mom or whatever. But most importantly, Gum Gum Mulligan is chaos for 1 dawn essentially in this deck. KOs pretty much everything that's relevant in this meta, except for Ika's Katakuri. But the idea is that you leverage your extra dawns in the mid game using Mulligan and Smokers to essentially create an insurmountable advantage that will eventually overwhelm your opponent. And well, mostly the reason that you can do that is because if you're pushing game with Smoker, your opponent is not getting any extra cards. So essentially, Smoker is the personification of a clock in this game, or as close as One Piece has ever gotten to an inevitable threat. Now, you can obviously not win the game only by playing Smoker, so here you have your other threats, Hody Jones and Eustace Captain Kidd. the big green cards, as I like to call them. Now, Hody and Kid are two fundamentally broken cards. Hody's, and they have this sort of like nuts synergy between them. Now, if your opponent is not playing aggressively into you, they're just gonna get insanely punished by Hody Jones. You're going to steal so many games only by playing this card on curve and just swinging into your opponent's board. However, if the way your opponent can play around this is playing aggressively into you, swinging into your life. Smoker, obviously a 4-life leader, so he dies very easily. And there, at that point, is when Kid comes in. Now, if your opponent tries to get you into a position where you cannot play Hody comfortably, it pretty much means that they have been swinging at life, and essentially that translates to a big fat hand that can help you protect your useless Kid when he comes down. Essentially putting your opponent into an impossible position, I guess you can say, where if they swing at your face, they feed your Kid, but if they swing at your board, they get insanely punished by Hody Jones. And as we discussed before, it's not easy to kill Smoker at all. Like Smoker defense 8 in this deck, which is pretty much infinite for the first few turns of the game. Now, something that you have to keep in mind when playing this deck is when you need your Smoker to have protection. Now, you will see sort of a pattern in this decks. You're essentially playing your Tashigi with your Smoker into either blue matchups because of the removal that blue has. Same thing goes for yellow. Like, yellow currently has an insane amount of cards that get rid of like a 5 cost very easily. Black, obviously, Finger Pistol, every single card in Lucci essentially kills your Smoker. So you need to play your Smoker down with Tashigi. And then we have sort of like some specific exceptions. I would say Lim, you definitely want to play Tashigi into Lim because they play the 6 cost Sakazuki that essentially gets rid of your Smoker on curve. So you need the Tashigi there. It's very, very important that you play Tashigi into the Lim matchup and that you're not greedy when playing it. And now Luffy and Katakuri, they sort of have their own box of like maybe, because some purple Luffys, most of them, at the very least, most that I have faced in the ladder, have essentially gotten rid of 9-cost Mom. Same thing goes for like purple Katakuri. I haven't played into that many purple Katakuris in ladder, so I'm not sure if they are running 9-cost Mom right now. But there's definitely like no easy answer on whether you should play Tashigi or not in those matchups. I would say that into Katakuri, you probably can err on the safe side and play the Tashigi with your Smoker. But for Pluffy, we'll discuss Pluffy specifically when we are discussing matchups. But just keep in mind that you can be greedy if you think that you don't run 9-cost Mom, but you might get turbo punished. Now, how do you build your Smoker deck? I think, and I'll fight anyone that says otherwise, every single Smoker deck, in my opinion at least, should have 4 Mulligan, 4 Smoker, 4 Hody, 4 Kid, Tashigi, Sanji, Chopper, etc. Every single card here, essentially, you should be playing at 4, except for the Igloo, or the Bubble, whatever. I kind of call the card Bubble. So the event, like the 2-cost event for the 2-cost Punk Hazard event, I run 2, but you should definitely run some amount of these. All these cards are essentially what you should be thinking of. These are the cards that make Smoker good. These are the cards that essentially turn sort of like a squishy 4-life leader into a big menace. Now, how do you play Smoker? Very easy. There's nothing very crazy in this chart. Essentially, you go to, when you hit 5 Dawn, you want to play your Smoker, set 3 Dawn straight with your leader ability and then your Smoker ability. You drop Tashigi if it is a Tashigi matchup. If not, you can either play your 3-cost Sanji, which here we have it. Swings for 6, which is insane. Like, this card is just fundamentally broken. One of the best red cards in the game. Or you can just use your other 3 Dawn to like develop a blocker, swing into your opponent. That's fine. If you're at 6 Dawn, however, you have if you're on the even curve, you have much more versatile turns because you can play Smoker plus Mold Gun, and on 8 Dawn, instead of just playing Hody, you can play Hody plus Mold Gun. Also, if you're at 8 Dawn, Smoker is one of the very few decks that can actually develop like a full kit on 8 Dawn. Obviously, kit an 8 cost card, but you need an extra Dawn to facilitate kit's ability, and Smoker essentially gets that for free. We'll discuss when that's important because it's very, very relevant in some matchups. But like, there's no science here. You play your big guy and you swing pretty hard. However, using Mold this is one of the reasons that Mold is so good, because in a lot of matchups you'd rather just snipe something off of your opponent's board instead of playing Tashigi. And especially on 8 Dawn, playing Hody plus Mold is a lot better than it seems to be. Because you can lower the power of something on your opponent's board and crash into it using maybe one of your searchers that's still left alive, something like that. Now, this is the list that I've been playing. I'm probably gonna play this exact list throughout the remainder of OP11, and this is pretty much the idea that I will try and carry forward throughout OP12, obviously including the new Slash package, doesn't matter. This is the list I'm currently running. Now, there's obviously some very strange cards here. Now, mind you, before I elaborate, I did manage to hit top 17 on the ranked ladder playing this exact list. I'm only saying this not because it's an insane achievement, but so that if you don't know who I am, you know that at the very least I kind of have an idea of what I'm talking about. Now, obviously, you're running double searchers, Kujaku or Kujaku, I don't know how it's pronounced. But the Navy Searcher can find Virgo, which is insanely relevant because this means that essentially the idea behind the deck is you need to be finding your Smoker on curve most of the time, or else you're going to lose. And Kujaku can find, if you fail to find Smoker with Kujaku or Tashigi, you can find Virgo instead. And then you can play your Virgo, obviously. So it essentially doubles the amount of chances you have to hit something that is Smoker or can find Smoker. So that's very, very relevant. Obviously, we're running 2 of the Igloo in the event. I think, like I said, I think the card is nasty. It combos very, very well with Kid. For Rosinante, very standard. For Sanji, for Tashigi, for Molgan, all that, nothing weird there. Like I said, I think Molgan is top 3 cards in this deck, so I would never run less than 4. We'll talk specifically why in a second, but just keep in mind that you want to run the Molgan. And then I'll talk, for Kid, for Hody, for Chopper, for Smoker, all this is very standard. Now we're running 2 X-Drakes, mostly because, I mean, it's sort of like a fat body that you can play for 6 Dawn. Obviously, not great if you are forced to play your X-Drake out. But it's a 2k counter, it's Navy, you can find it with Kujaku. It's fine, it allows us to have 20 Navy hits, which is the magic number that I was going for. That essentially translates to you hitting using your searchers 93% of the time, 93-ish, which I find to be a very good number. You don't want to be messing with your searcher in this deck because you're always low on hand. Because you're a 4-life leader. Now, some interesting cards that I've chosen here. We're running 2 Frankie, 2k counter Frankie. Now, this card is not amazing, but it's definitely great in this specific meta. Reality is that in this meta, I want to drink some of this. But reality is that in this meta, with UP Luffy, Green Purple Luffy, and Purple Luffy being everywhere, the Frankie essentially acts as like an extra copy of Hody Jones if you need to finish game. So the idea would be, if you don't have a Hody in hand to turn off the Gum Gum Giants and the such, you can essentially play Frankie in this deck for 1 Dawn when you're trying to get like an extra push late game. And sometimes the Frankie just saves your ass. The card is actually very, very strong. Obviously, it's not great in every single matchup, but the card is a 2k counter. Obviously unsearchable, but I would rather have two of these as like essential extra backups when you don't have Hody to finish the game. Now we're running one Dull and one Honesty Impact. Now, mind you, I don't think Dull is an insane card in this deck. It's a very steep cost to trash a card from your hand, but the fact that Dull gives minus 6k power essentially means that when you play Dull, you trash a card from your hand, and you're pitching that card to trade for free using your leader hit, or maybe swinging with like a Virgo that you have from turn 1 into one of your opponent's cards. The specific reason that this card is so good in this matchup, in this deck, is that one, it's searchable, obviously very strong, but two, you're not running anything to pitch kit with, and for the most part, drawing more than one kit is essentially playing with one less card in your hand. So the fact that Dull turns one of your extra kits into a live card, let's say, definitely becomes very, very relevant. The reason I'm running one Dull and one Honesty Impact is that I kind of like the split. They both sort of do the same thing. Dull is a little bit harder to use, but the card has counter. I'm not a fan of running one-offs. So if you want to make your deck a little bit more consistent, maybe running two Honesty Impacts is better. Honesty Impact is definitely the more consistent card. It's self-sufficient. You can play it together with Smoker in your 8 Dawn turn. However, you should definitely give Dull a try. I wouldn't run two. It's sort of like a very situational card. But if you manage to play it, she blocks, which is great in a deck where you're running 8-cost kid. And she's sort of like a backup way for me to feel confident running for kids in a deck that needs to have most of its hand be useful all the time. And then we're running my favorite tech card, let's say, of choice in this deck, the Vanilla Mocha from the latest set. Now, this card might seem a little bit trolled because it's just a vanilla 4/6, but 4/6 is an insane stat line, and this card gets even better when you take into account that in this deck, Mocha is essentially a 4/7. Obviously, it swings 6, but it defends 7, and most of the times, when you are playing Mocha, you're going to be swinging into a 6k leader, because you're either going to be playing into Grape Luffy or into UP Luffy, which means that you're essentially having a vanilla that trades for one card in your opponent's hand every single turn, because you're going to be swinging 6 into 6. Now, these decks run a lot of 2Ks and very few 1Ks, so swinging 6 into 6 is oftentimes more than enough to get your opponent to pitch like a Usahachi or something like that, which is great. They help you to push the game forward. And they're essentially in games where you're pretty much going to lose because you haven't drawn your smokers in time and you haven't seen your Sanjis. This is essentially a very crappy version of Sanji or a very crappy version of Smoker, and that's more than enough. Like, honestly, this is a card that you are happy to never play, but you're definitely glad it's in your deck when you have to play it, because it helps you in games that you were not winning otherwise. Now, other cards that you might be tempted to run in Smoker. Now, these cards I chose to not run, but you can try them out. I wouldn't play them. Like, I've tested all of these out, but to each their own. Now, Bam Beckman, probably the best card that I'm not running. This card is just fundamentally broken. The reason I'm not running it is just it's bad into Snakeman Luffy. So it's sort of like a bad card. Sort of like the best bad meta card, I guess. The card, like I said, fundamentally broken. It has counter. It swings 7, so it instantly turns your leader on. But it does nothing into Teach. It does nothing into Snakeman Luffy. And that's just reason enough, I would say, to cut it. Now, going back for a second, the deck list is pretty tight. Like, you want to run, or at the very least, I want to run 20 Punk Hazard hits, which means that you have to run 2 Mocha or 2 Monet or something like that, plus the 2 Igloo to hit 20. and you need to run like the extra X or something like that to hit 20 Navy as well. So, fitting a card that's not Hody, not Kid, and not Navy or Punk Hazard is very hard. And like it's just unfortunate, but it doesn't really hit anything that's good in this meta. It's decent into into Grape Luffy, but it's only decent if you're running Monet as well. And there's definitely not room at the very least, in my opinion, to run both. Now, Dragon has sort of like a tech card. It's very, very good into Snakeman, very, very good into Grape Luffy. The card is just good. However, it is another big guy, like another big asshole that's not named Kid or Hody. And I'd rather personally run the 4 Kid and the 4 Hody before running Dragon. Now, Dragon is very, very good especially into Snakeman, I would say. Mostly because Snakeman cannot pressure you enough. But, this card, it's sort of like, it's very good when you're winning. It's a very win more card. If you're head on board, you play Dragon, you essentially seal the game. But I personally believe that Hody already does that. The card is not bad. You can definitely play it. I just think it's not as good as the card kind of seems to be. Now, Monet, very good card, obviously, but it kind of doesn't do enough anymore. Like, it used to be that you can play Monet into Van Beckman to get rid of, like, a Sanji Pudding for your opponent if you're playing into Grape Luffy. However, as it stands right now, Monet, if you're not running the Van Beckmans, it's just not good enough, in my opinion, to justify a deck slot. You will definitely get a lot more use off of Mocha in games that you need to win and you're going to lose otherwise. Monet, like I said, it's sort of like in the same vein as Dragon. If you're not comboing it with Beckman, sort of like a win more card. The one thing that Monet allows you to do that the deck cannot currently do is you can play Monet into Molgan and get rid of an A-class Katakuri, but it's sort of like very marginal upside. I wouldn't do it. You can pretty much frequently bait your opponent into blocking with Katakuri anyways, and then Molganing the Katakuri and swinging over it, which is obviously harder and extra steps at killing it. But I don't know. I don't think Monet just does enough to justify a deck slot. Now, Carrot and Luffy, they're sort of like the other traditional 5-drops that you could be running in this deck. I just don't think they're good enough to justify a deck slot. Like I said, all these cards on the top row, except for me, I guess, but the cards in the top row, not searchable. Carrot is good, but its best matchup used to be Doflamingo, and with Doflamingo gone, you kind of don't want to run a 5-drop that does not allow you to turn on your leader ability on its own. You want to be playing Smoker anyways in 5 when you're at 5 down. Same thing goes for Luffy. The card used to be very, 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 very good into Shanks, but Shanks has pretty much been erased from the meta. And if you're playing into Snakeman, which is another matchup where Luffy is good, you kind of don't want to play Luffy on curve anyways. You pretty much be rather playing Smoker. And Luffy additionally doesn't have counter, which is sort of like a very big ask in a deck that is already running 4 kits, 4 Hodys, 4 Smokers. Now, the cards in the bottom row, a little bit less common, but they deserve talking about anyways. Isho and Borsalino are sort of like, they're both Navy cards. Isho doesn't die to Van Beckman, which used to be very relevant because, of course, on your opponent's turn, he's a 7k because of your leader ability. Now, this used to be insanely relevant because Shanks was, still is one of your worst matchups, but it used to be everywhere. However, right now, Isho and Borsalino, they're both sort of like anti-aggro cards. You play them on curve, you snipe your opponent's Belo Betties, raise maxes, and things like that, and suddenly you're in a very good position. They are not bad. I would definitely, like, if I wanted to run an extra card out of all of these, the card I'm most tempted to run in the deck is Borsalino, because you can play him down with Kid, you can play him on curve. It's just sort of like very solid all around, but these cards are not like game-changingly powerful, and I don't know. I think Isho at 5 Dawn in a meta where Snakeman is the most played deck is sort of like I don't know, sort of like a big ask. And Borsellino, like I said, he's fine. I don't personally feel like you would rather play him over Doll or over Honesty Impact, which are my two flex Navy slots. Um, but he's fine. He's playable. Then Baccarat, I don't know. I don't see what the big deal about this card is. Yes, it's a blocker. You can play her down with Kid, and she allows you to filter cards in your hand for counter. Obviously, good. Like the card is definitely playable. I just don't see what the huge deal with this card is. You don't really want to be pitching cards just because, anyways. You want to use your blockers to block, and Rodinante, Tukas Rodinante is obviously just better than this card. Um, Now, Samurai and Glorb are weird cards. Glorb is sort of like the very, very crappy version of Igloo, but it's Navy, so you can search it. I wouldn't personally play it. I think the card is a little on the underpowered side. But if there's a deck that can play Glorb, it's definitely this one. And Samurai, on the other hand, I don't know. The card just it seems so good on paper, but I played with it a lot and I just ended up cutting it. It's a shame because I really like the card and I think the card draw is very good in this deck. But it leads to some incredible early turns, but I don't know. I just think like running another brick is kind of like not good enough. If that makes any sense, I guess. Okay, moving into the final part of the video. Now, we're going to be talking matchups here. The check means I think you win the matchup. You will see some matchups have a little die besides the picture of the opponent leader. That means I think the die defines who wins and loses. And then, of course, those that have no check mark means that you lose the matchup. That you lose the matchup. Now, going first, Snakeman Luffy. Now, the matchups that have Tashigi besides the opponent leader, it means that those are matchups where you want to play Tashigi. Otherwise, if you don't see Tashigi there, you just want to keep the Tashigi in your hand, never play it. It's fine because your smoker is not at risk of getting removed. Now, Snakeman Luffy, surprisingly very easy matchup. So you just pretty much play on curve. You play your big guys. Don't be afraid to keep greedier hands into Snakeman because Snakeman is a deck that applies zero pressure in the early game. The way you beat Snakeman essentially is you build a board. You typically can build a board very easily. And suddenly you're sort of like facing your opponent's like Snakeman, and your board is something like Kid, Hody, Smoker, Tashigi, and sort of like a blocker, something like that. If you manage to get on that position, then you pretty much win. The games you lose against Snakeman are either games where you just face check your opponent's first life and it's like a ramp event, and your opponent gets to like 8 Dawn a turn earlier. That's very rough. Or games where your opponent goes Sanji Big Mom into Sanji Big Mom and you only had one Tashigi. Tashigi in this matchup is insanely important because if your opponent's Big Mom hits a smoker, it's essentially kind of game over. So you want to search for multiple copies of Tashigi. Tashigi is very, very important in this matchup. Additionally, if you don't see Smoker, you can still win this matchup. But if you don't see Tashigi, your opponent will just red rock your kid, and you will just lose. So that's something to keep in mind. Now, Gray Luffy or Green Purple Luffy. Green Purple Luffy is a matchup that I think is I don't know, it's sort of very particular, but it's a matchup where your red cards do a lot of the work here. Green Purple Luffy obviously runs, for the most part, no removal. Some Green Purple Luffys will radio knife your smoker. I mean, it happens. You shouldn't play around that because it's just very, very fringe. Now, Mulgun shines in this matchup and into the next matchup that we're going to be talking about. But Mulgun is pretty much the best card in the deck in this matchup. Ideally, you want to go second into Green Purple Luffy. And well, the idea here is that you just essentially Smoker Mulgun the Sanji Pudding that they played. The next turn, you either Smoker Mulligan again or Hody Jones Mulligan. Ideally, if you remove, like if you manage to see 2 Mulligans in this matchup, you should win pretty much every single time. Additionally, this is one of the matchups where this and Buggy specifically, but these are matchups where Chopper really shines. So if you manage to get like a Chopper behind, it's very important. The reason this is because the way you lose against Grape Luffy is you either don't see Kid or you do see Kid and they Gamma Knife your Kid. So staying healthy in this matchup is very important, and Chopper is great at doing that. So this is a matchup where if you get the choice between playing Mocha or playing Chopper, you'd rather play Chopper. And even if you don't see the Mulligan, playing Smoker into Chopper is just great. Additionally, Green Purple Luffy's weakness, I would say, is that it's very, very good at executing its own game plan, but it has little to no way to interact with your board. Aside from like Electrical Luna, things like that, but like it has no hard removal. So you can pretty much develop your own board very, very easily. And Smoker is great in matchups where each deck wants to do its own thing. Now, Black Purple Luffy. Black Purple Luffy, as it stands right now, is sort of like Turbo Beer Luffy dot deck. Essentially, it plays Beer Luffy, and if the Beer Luffy manages to stick, then the deck works. And if it doesn't, then the deck doesn't work. It's a 4-life leader. You play 4 Hody Jones, so you just turn off Gum Gum Giant. Mulligan is literally the perfect card at dealing with Beer Luffy. Now here you want to go first, regardless of the fact that you want to play Mulligan. Mostly because you just care about swinging hard into this guy. But it's a very easy matchup. Even if everything goes wrong for you, just play Kid, and Kid is essentially like sending your leader at 8. So even if you see terrible, if you see no Mulligans, you're late on the Smoker, you still have a chance into this deck. One of your best matchups, definitely. Buggy, you want to go first into Buggy, obviously, because of Buggy's ability and because Smoker is just great going first, generally speaking. Now, Buggy is a matchup where you don't need to play Tashigi at the same time you play your Smoker, because you should. I mean, Buggy needs to play something on his follow-up turn. He cannot just remove your Smoker straight up, for the most part, at the very least. However, you want to develop your Tashigi because you're kind of afraid of Gravity Blade hitting you. Now, Buggy, sort of in the same vein as Luffy, the way you lose against Buggy is you either don't see your Tashigi and you get your Smoker removed, your Kid removed, things like that, or you ran out of life and you didn't see an 8-drop Kid. So Chopper is very, very valuable here for keeping healthy, mostly specifically in the case of Buggy, because unlike Grape Luffy, that can commit some extra dawn to punishing your Chopper by swinging 7 for 1 dawn, Buggy is essentially going to be using his entire hand every single turn, all of his dawn every single turn to play cards, which means that Chopper essentially just soaks a free 5k swing from leader every single turn. There's no way Buggy has 2 extra dawn to punish you. So just play your Chopper, and Chopper soaks up literally an entire leader swing every single turn. And that shit stacks up throughout the game. Now, Teach. Teach used to be hard because Teach used to run for Shigan, like the finger pistol, and what's the name of this card? For the Shiryu, like the forecast Shiryu that essentially swallowed Tashigi for free. As it stands right now, Teach is a very easy matchup. You want to go first because you don't want to let him play Kusan on curve. So you want to take the even curve off of him. The odd curve? The odd curve, yeah. You want to go first, so that's the odd curve. Mostly because Teach's curve when playing Kusan on 5 is just better against you than anything else. But without the Shiryus, the new Teach lists are just not good enough at dealing with your Tashigi. And if a Smoker manages to stick for like more than 1 turn, then it's sort of game over. Like old teach lists used to be more like Turbo, Jesus Burgess type things, and that used to be better into Smoker. But as it stands right now, not only your deck got better on OP11, teach lists in general just sacrificed the cards that are good into Smoker. So you sort of have sort of like a free coast into teach. Now, moving into the mirror, you want to go first. The mirror is a matchup where you don't want to play Tashigi, mostly because Gun doesn't hit Smoker, because Smoker defends 8 when you're playing against Smoker. And it's another one of those matchups where the opponent is gonna wanna use most of his Dawn to develop board. So you wanna play your Chopper and have it soak up hits. Gun is especially relevant into Smoker and Bonney, which pretty much every single one of these tips is relevant for. Because when your opponent plays the 8-cost kid, you just Gun and you pretty much win the game right then and there. But also into Bonney, Gun is just an insane card. It kills Cavendish, it kills Carrot, kills Kid, gets rid of like Kid Killer with only the second part of the effect, so you can work through like the Bonney effect. I don't know. Bonney statistically, like if you look at the Sims stats, it's sort of like a rough Smoker matchup, but I think as long as you manage to use your Guns and your Hody Jones in smart ways, you should have no problem dealing with Bonney. Or at the very least, I haven't been having a lot of trouble. Obviously, always be scared of like 9-cost Shanks, so try to develop your Rosinantes aggressively in the late game at least, but I don't know. Bonney's sort of like a matchup where your kid is just so much better than Bonney's, because if you put Bonney in a position where she has to play kid, she's always a danger of like catching Gun or like Honesty Impact, something like that, and then it just instantly losing because of the tempo swing that killing kid for like 2 Dawn gives you. Now, Purple Luffy. Purple Luffy is a matchup that statistically even for Smoker. I think it's even because the person that goes first has a huge advantage. First matchup where the die roll is the most important, I would say. Well, I guess sort of like I forgot, but I guess the die is important in the mirror as well. You really want to go first in the mirror. Now, Purple Luffy, no key cards here, no Tashigi or no Tashigi. I honestly don't know. It used to be that you needed to see your Tashigi because Purple Luffy played 9-cost Mom. And if your 9-cost Mom on curve targeted your Smoker, you instantly lost the game. This still applies today. Like, it's not like that got any easier. But Purple Luffy now has 8-drop Katakuri. 8-drop Katakuri is a menace of a card. The card is insanely strong. It's cracked on specifically on Purple Luffy. It's just cracked in general, but on Purple Luffy, it's much more of a menace because of how aggressive the deck is and because of how aggressive Katakuri is as a card. However, a lot of Purple Luffys opted to play Katakuri instead of the 9-cost Mom. So if you're not scared of 9-cost Mom, if you're not scared of 9-cost Mom, keeping your Tashigi in hand as extra counter is obviously very helpful. I would personally advise that you should play the Tashigi just in case, because if 9-cost Mom hits Smoker, you lose. But to each their own. I mean, I can definitely see the argument against playing Tashigi on curve to protect Smoker, because the only card that actually deals with Smoker in Purple Luffy is the 9-cost Mom. But, something to keep in mind. I would still play it, but, now, Rob Lucci, probably the hardest counter to Smoker. You want to go first. You want to play Tashigi, obviously. Now, this is a matchup where if you don't see, 3 Tashigis, you're probably losing. Rob Lucci is just so hard. It's crazy because when I first read Tashigi, I thought, okay, Smoker is going to definitely have a good matchup into Rob Lucci, because he can't remove your board. But as it turns out, the way you play against Smoker, instead of not trying to remove his board and just trying to fight him, the way you actually want to play against Smoker is to just ridiculously efficiently remove his board. Um, I don't know if there's a lot of advice I can give here. Hody Jones is obviously at his best. The way I win against Lucci when I win, which is not very common, is by forcing him to use his removal early in, to try and get my smokers, something like that. And then you eventually get in a position where you can stick a kid and the kid doesn't die because you have Tashigi and Rosinante back up. But it's very hard to get to the position. It's definitely not common. Now, Belo Betty is sort of like a dice matchup. I think that if you win the die roll, you win. You just go second, and I think I don't know if it's true, but I pretty much feel like when going second, Smoker is heavily favored. This is one of the matchups where if you see Mulligan, then that's great, but if you lose the die roll, you're pretty much doomed. Now, there's a very particular thing here where if you go second, you you're kind of in a position where you can not swing into Velo Betty and win, because you essentially just kind of like stall the Velo Betty out, develop a kid, and get to the kid turn one turn faster, and you manage to play Chopper and Curve. So you essentially want to go something like Chopper into Smoker into Kid, maybe Smoker Mulligan if you're able to, and you kind of get to a point where you play Kid and you're healthy enough that you can kind of win against Velobete without having to luck your way into hitting life without triggering stuff. However, if you're going first, unfortunately, you have to swing into Velobete. So that's the one piece of advice that I have for people wanting to play Smoker. If you're playing into Velobete and you're going first, you want to pressure life because you're not going to be able to stall Velobete out. You're going to die before that, or you're going to play like a half-assed useless Captain Kid with 3 cards in hand or something like that, and that's just a losing play. Especially into a deck that's part red, because that means that if they have whatever to reduce the kit's power, then you're just instantly losing. So, if you're going first, definitely go the aggro route. Yes, sometimes you're going to face check into like blocker Karasu or something like that, but it's better to have a 25% chance to win the game than to have a 0% chance to win the game because you're dying slowly. Now, Shanks is just a terrible matchup for Smoker. Shanks essentially is like the Great Wall. You want to swing at him very hard, but you're never going to be able to pierce Shanks' defense fast enough. You want to go first. You definitely want to develop Tashigi when possible. Shanks is a matchup actually where maybe the most important card that you can draw is the 3-cost Sanji, because he swings hard. And Shanks is going to deal with whatever you play anyways. Tashigi is very important in this matchup. However, obviously, this is one of those matchups where you're not favored. You want to play Smoker and Curve. You want to push your advantage with Smoker. And if Shanks manages to just like Otama backman your Smoker because you didn't see Tashigi or something like that, you're probably going to lose. It's not that Smoker is a pretty straightforward deck, but Shanks is just like a very, very strong, very simple playstyle type deck, and he just matches well into Smoker. Now, Enel, I would say it's not that important whether you go first or second, but you definitely want to go first if given the chance. The curve just works out better for you if you're going first. You get Smoker down earlier, which is obviously great, but also the best card as Enel into Smoker is Yamato. So you kind of put him in a position where you force him to play Yamato off curve. The reason for this is essentially, playing into Enel as any deck, probably deserving of its own video, but I would say if you're playing into Enel properly, swing it with your Smoker, not swinging unless necessary with the guys that you've already played, you're going to put Enel in a position where he needs to heal, and you want him to play either Ace or the new Enel. instead of Yamato, because for Ace or the new Enel to remove one of your guys or to try and burn hand off of you, um, he has to turn the character sideways, and then you can swing back into the Ace or the Enel. Whereas with Yamato, you can't. This is one of those matchups where pretty much the entire green package works very, very well. Tashigi protects from all the mid-range removal that Enel has. Smoker swings with Banish, which is amazing. He's a leader that wants to stay at 1 life forever, because it essentially means that you're definitely burning cards when swinging into life. And the Kid in this matchup, as well as every yellow matchup since they banned Raigo, it's just a great card. Enel has no clean out to Kid except for hitting him really hard, and so Kid is going to allow you to essentially get a bunch of advantage. But even Hody Jones obviously insane into Enel. If they are trying to stall you, even if you're not trying to stall you, Hody Jones is just great into the Enel matchup because he swings for 8 with Rush. So, I mean, no science there, I guess. It's just a straightforward matchup. Now, we're coming to we're kind of like the end of the video. Now, these matchups, I mean, Law is sort of like a more common deck. Now, Law is sort of like reverse Shanks in the sense that Law wants to do a bunch of cool shit while you just play like a big guy and brute force your way through. You want to go second, mostly not because Law's going second curve is so much better than his going first curve, but the reason you want to go second is because you're definitely scared of Law using leader ability to play Jewelry Bonney on 4 Dawn and freezing you out of your 5th Dawn for your 5 Dawn turn. I don't know if I'm making the explanation very clear, but essentially Law can put you in a position where he logs you out of your 5th Dawn on your 5 Dawn turn. You can't play Smoker if that happens, and then you instantly lose the game. So you want to go second. You want to see Mulligan, obviously. Mulligan is the best card here. Now, Law is a deck that says he has 4 lives. Like, if you look at the card, it says 4 life. But actually, Law only has 2 lives. Because he is going to use 2 of his lives to use leader ability. So essentially, if you just manage to survive, play Hody, play Smoker, do your own thing, you're going to brute force your way through, which is obviously good, because it means that the onus of outplaying you or doing like something very, very backbreaking is on him. Which is unlike the deck for most of the matchups. However, I don't know. Mulligan is just like the tempo swing card of this deck. Mulligan and Hody, they both are. But Law swings pretty hard, so it's hard to land like a solid Hody. One thing that you have going for you that Law doesn't is that you have power reducers and Law doesn't. Which means that if you get to a point where you play Kid and your opponent plays Kid as well, you always have the ability to blow him out with the Mulligan. And then the other 3 decks here are pretty straightforward. I mean, Nami just want to play Tashigi and swing hard into it. Obviously, Nami has a very strong leader ability, but it's not like big science or anything. You can just pretty much fight Nami comfortably, just playing your standard gameplay. One thing you should keep in mind is that sometimes you want to combo before you would usually want to do it. Yeah, yes. Sometimes you want to combo out of like a 7k swing earlier than you would be doing so in other matchups, just to deny the extra card for Nami. Like, remember, Nami draws every single time a life goes through. Like, you take a life or they take a life. So if they haven't taken a life on their turn and they play like 2 cast each, use leader ability, use teach ability and then swing at you for like 7, maybe you want to combo earlier. Other than that, you just play your standard Smoker gameplay and you will be just fine. Purple Katakuri, sort of like the same advice like every other Katakuri. Like every other normal matchup. You want to go first, you want to set your Tashigi here, like I said before, most Katakuris are not running 9-cost Mom, or if they are, they're running 1 or 2. But you kind of have the luxury of playing Tashigi into Katakuri because the deck is just not as strong. So, you know, you want to go first. I will play Tashigi pretty much every single time here. Just because it's sort of like a safety ball. And then, you know, just sit behind Kid and try and drain him out using Smoker Swings. Lim is probably the most straightforward matchup that Smoker has, in the sense that if you go first, you win, kind of. And if you go second, you pretty much instantly lose, and there's no way of coming back. So winning the die roll against Lim is crazy important. Other than that, you want to play Tashigi because of Sakatsuki, and it's one of those matchups where Kid really does a lot of the work. So yeah. Now, this is actually the end of the video. Zoro, Nami, Yamato, and Vegapunk. I don't know. These are kind of like straightforward matchups as well. For Zoro, you want to see Mulgun because it kills Chopper, pretty much just because of that. Zoro animals we're talking about here, obviously. Now, this is Zoro is hard. It's essentially harder Belo Betty, in my opinion, at the very least. You want to go first into Zoro. You want to be careful not to swing into Zoro if he's left some Dawn up, because you can get insanely punished with the Shut Up and Come With Me event. Then, I mean, Yamato is sort of like your typical aggro green-yellow stuff. Yamato is kind of like Belo Betty in the sense that you want to go second and you want to play very defensively. However, unlike Belo Betty, Yamato is in a mixture of colors that has no way of dealing with Eustace Captain Kid. So essentially, the game sort of like devolves into you playing Fortress until you can play Kid and land it on behind the Kid. If you manage to do that without losing before, you win. If Yamato hits you for like double double banish, you pretty much lose. But there's not a lot to do there. Vegapunk, a smoker, is one of those matchups where, again, you want to see your smoker, play him with Tashigi. You manage to do that, you pretty much win the game. And Kid is sort of like in the same vein as Yamato. This is one of those matchups like yellow aggro, where if you land the Kid, you pretty much win the game as well. Like Vegapunk has no way of dealing with Eustace Captain Kid. So this is sort of like this is one of those matchups where you want to play very standard Smoker Tashigi, play the Kid and curve, and you instantly win. And finally, Nami, in the same vein as Enel, playing against Nami is sort of like an acquired skill of playing the One Piece card game as a whole. You want to go second into Nami, mostly because of the extra card. The best card in the matchup is obviously Hody Jones. If you see two Hody Jones, you're probably going to win into Nami every single time. Smoker has Banish, which is crazy into Nami because it denies the triggers. Mostly, you just don't want to swing dumb into Nami. There's some weird turns with this deck where you want to swing like 15k with Smoker and then pass. If your opponent just lets life go through, only to deny cards. But essentially, just swinging smart into Nami, not letting him get free value off of like White Snake because you swung 5 with leader or something like that. If you manage to avoid doing that, you should always win against Nami. Now, this brings us to the end of the video. I hope you liked the guide, and I hope it was actually useful for you to, if you wanted to learn how to play the deck. Feel free to ask any questions, and I would love it if you subscribed and liked the video. This took a bunch of time to record, so hope I see you around in the channel.